All right, welcome everybody to the Escape America Now members only webinar about living in Chile under threat. It was just sort of a follow-up webinar to the two public webinars we gave. And I'm recording it here. Actually, a few members have shown up for the live version. Maybe more will come later, but this will be posted also to the members forum and room so that other members who didn't get to attend live will be able to come. Now, I know they're probably missing some important college football or something. I guess baseball's over, so they might be attracted to some sporting event today that keeps them away. But there are some interesting details that we can add to what's been happening here in Chile. And I intend to give a brief introduction of what I know about these things and then to talk about some of the issues I've mentioned here on the website and the blog entry to what's going on here in Chile, specifically when we talk about whether or not we should stay, whether we should go, stay and fight, flee if you prefer those terminologies. And if we stay and fight, what are the parameters? What are we dealing with? I've already covered some of this before, and I'm not going to take away from anything, especially the last seminar from what I gave, but there are some other details that we need to be aware of that we may have missed, or a lot of people may have missed in the news. I ended up spending a number of hours today and last night just trying to catch up on the latest. And it's not easy to get the latest, at least it hasn't been for me. And I'm also trusting news services and semi-leftist agencies for figures, which I always consider to be quite dubious, doubtful in every way. But I don't have much else to work with. I think probably most of it's accurate, but I mentioned that as a disclaimer that we may have some variation over the numbers that I've been able to receive. One positive thing out of all this before I start is because we've already discussed and looked at Chile being in flames, and the other one with all the disaster and the rioting going on in Chile, and what do we do? There has been some interesting, good humanitarian work, and I'm not going to show the videos this time because we don't know why the second video was banned from YouTube. I've never had a video in my life banned from YouTube or anywhere. It might have been because we showed the bodies of some of the hoodlums or the scoundrels that did some arson at different buildings and were burned. Their bodies were just, ash crusts or whatever they're called after they did the deed, and the Carabineros filmed it and I showed it. And that might have been too violent, and there might have been other things, might have been some other kind of, who knows, some kind of social media. So I'm not going to show much. I don't think I'm going to show any social media today, and even though there's plenty of it to back up and show what we're doing. But I will show some things that are on news services and on websites. Again, not a whole lot, but shouldn't be anything to drive anybody to think this is a violent or violence promoting broadcast. Or anyway, who knows? Maybe they just hate the fact that we're libertarians here and they're communists or leftists or something else. I don't know. Have no idea. YouTube did not respond why they banned our second video. But to me, it's kind of a silly joke. And Joe mentions here censorship by big tech is a mark of honor today. Apparently so. So I'm finally honored after all this time. Somebody told me that when we're in Spanish, which most of my videos are, we don't have that problem. They just don't censor in Spanish that much, which is fine. That's great. But in English, apparently they have people snooping around and trying to find reason to ban videos. Anyway, well, one of the nice things that you see throughout all this process is the people who are standing up in civil society to stop this aggression that we face, this plunder, this looting, the vandalism and graffiti, the window breaking, the robbing, looting of the stores, and arson. And a lot of these people are now wearing the yellow vest. It's kind of funny. The yellow vest came into Chilean law or legislation a number of years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where Michelle Bachelet obligated everybody who's driving a vehicle to carry one of these under their seat. Of course, we looked at it as just a maneuver to help one of her buddies who happened to have this company that produced these yellow vests to make a lot of money, and I'm sure that's the case. But a lot of people have these yellow vests that they purchase, sometimes as much as 5,000 pesos or about $7 or $8, and sometimes much less than that after the market got sort of saturated with them. But people are putting on these yellow vests, trying to identify themselves as different than the looters and communists and criminals, and even the run-of-the-mill protesters from the center left who are out on the streets. And they're there to show their support, not only for the military, but also to defend, if possible, the shops from being looted or burned down. And it's fun to watch the social media videos. Some of them have pictures of people. I think I may have shown this one last time. We're running out of stores, and these people with the yellow vests are there beating them. And as they run out and showing their disapproval, others are armed with hammers besides sticks and other things like that. And it's too bad they're not armed with guns, because it's far more effective to simply shoot people that are trying to destroy private property and kill people than it is to try to beat them with a stick. And sometimes the looters are very mean when somebody stands up to them. I saw social media the other day where 6 of them jumped the guy who was complaining about them looting a pharmacy. It was a pharmacy. And they just kicked him and punched him and beat him up. All, 5 or 6 of them. I think there was 4 to begin with, and another couple joined. They just beat the guy up. So that's sad that does happen. But yet there are people who are willing to take a stand in civil society, and this is, of course, a very libertarian position. We see the state as failing in all its capacities, including national defense or civil defense. It's not a good organization in general, and even for those who are minarchists have to concur with that, because I tend to be a minarchist in the mornings, although less so lately, and in the evening just a libertarian anarchist, because I don't see any use for the state pretty much. Most of the time, at any rate. That's my seesaw position I'm stating publicly, in case anybody has a question about that. But yeah, when you see the state fail, you need to know that the private individuals could do a better job of defense, just like they did in the LA riots in 1992 and otherwise. And it could be the same here in Chile if we had better laws for allowing more people to have guns, and other kinds of guns besides just shotguns and pistols too. But that is another issue for another day, and something important, though, that we need to emphasize as libertarians here, that we are in favor of gun rights and people owning firearms in order to defend their own property and defend other people. We're not into aggression in any way, but when people are aggressing us, then we don't have any problem with defending ourselves as libertarians. In fact, libertarians are the great champions of using arms. So it's unfortunate that these yellow-jacketed people here don't have much chance. There's also been a lot of other aggression against civilians besides just what has been seen in the media as the masses, these hordes move through the streets. And one of the great victims has been the firemen. I think I actually can share the screen and show a picture of some of this. Let me back up a minute, see if I can do that. I should just double check with you. Joe, were you able to start the recording of this also? Just send me a quick note if you can while I'm trying to share the screen here. Okay, great. Thank you, Joe, for confirming. Okay, now I'm sharing the screen. I've got a bunch of stuff to show, like this one, the Metro we'll get to in just a minute. This says here, attacks on against bomberos, which are the firemen, during the protests. The never before happening wickedness of aggressing or attacking these good boys. Chilean firemen are volunteers. They do it because, like all firemen, they're strange people. They like fire. They like to deal with it. They like to put it out. They get a thrill from it. And having studied firemen for so many years as part of my professional work in building regulation, that's all I can conclude about them. They're very nice people, dedicated, great people, generally speaking. But there's something about them that has a fascination with fire. And so if you pay them or not, they're still going to go do the same work, curiously. They even in Chile buy their own uniforms. So that it's a negative price. You're going to go be a fireman, you're going to lose a lot of sleep. You're going to have to pay a lot of money to go buy all this uniform and other equipment. And you're not going to receive any kind of salary. There are a few paid administrative positions like secretaries, I think, but very little. They operate on donations, and also they get a certain quota from the municipalities, maybe even the federal government here. But they're going out and fire, they're risking their lives, and these communists are setting fires. I don't think it's the vandals that are doing the arson. It doesn't make sense for somebody who wants to loot a store to vandalize the store and then burn it down. Anyway, maybe there's a reason for it. I can't think of one. It seems like a lot of extra work to go through, and not only that, a lot of extra jail time if they happen to get caught. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think that communists are doing this because they want to destroy capitalist business. I think it's their baby. And maybe there's some other non-communist party members that are part of what they call the Frente Amplio here, which is almost the same thing as communists, just a different name. And they're attacking these guys. They're trying to put out fires, and these guys will just start, beating them up or throwing rocks at them or sticks or, whatever, while they're trying to fight the fire. So that's something that hasn't been really emphasized a lot, and it should be, because it's not just the cops and the military that suffer, but also other people like these carabineiros. So there are some good sides to what's going on in Chile. We see that there is this kind of resistance groups that spring up spontaneously in the market to protect business, protect lives, people collectively acting against communists and against these criminals to stop doing what's happening in Chile. And as libertarians, we need to really take advantage of this, right? We need to write articles about this. We need to say what we like is common defense, and what we need is guns. And with those two things, we really don't need the military on the streets or the carabineros. Thank you very much. They're fine. We're not against them in any way, but I'm not speaking against any of those people or those professions, but they're hamstrung. They completely think that they fear that they're going to go to jail if they violate the human rights of some criminal or communist. And when I repeat myself, I say those two words because there's these agencies that'll be here whistleblowing on what they do, and they don't want to have a problem. But they don't mind watching while private civilians beat up these people or whatever it takes to stop them from committing crimes. And so in a civil society, that actually works out pretty well. Let's go back and talk about the metro. I've got several things to share here today. This I thought was very interesting when I got this map. It was in El Mercurio today, and I think it's been there every day for a while. And the metro system in Santiago, the metro system on the other parts of the country, like in Concepcion, the bio train, and there's a little train that runs from like Talca to Constitucion on the coast. Those are unaffected. Also, the north-south train that leaves Santiago and goes down to Rancagua and then goes to Curicó and Talca was also unaffected by all of this so far. There was some relatively minor damage in Concepcion and some of the stations, but they impeded traffic a little bit. I think they cut off, as I understand, some of the turnstiles you could go through. People had to wait a little bit longer, but basically the trains always functioned. That wasn't the same in Valparaiso. And the Merval, where we live, it's only one line. It goes from the port of Valparaiso inland after it goes through Viña. And in Viña, turning directly east, it ends up in La Mache, which has then some buses that reach out as far as Omue or Quillota or La Cruz, quite a ways inland. In fact, right near Ruta 5 or Route 5. The main highway running north-south in Chile. But on that line, there was a lot of damage done. There was damage done to the beautiful glass encasement there at Viña del Mar down by the plaza, from what I understand. I didn't actually take pictures of it, even though I could have at some point gone down there and done so. But it didn't stop the station from operating there. The one right after it, though, closer to the beach, Miramar, was closed, and it was closed until October 23rd, as I understand it, and then it was reopened. Two other metro stops, one was in Quillota, Quilpue, which is inland from Viña del Mar. It was closed until the 27th. It was badly damaged, and so there was no stopping there, nobody getting on and off. And there was also one that was damaged at Bella Vista, in Valparaiso. That's the center kind of government power, where you have the regional government there, the main tax headquarters is there for the SII, and the immigration service people. So the foreigners that come here to get visas all can use that metro stop. And there are other kinds of business and things there. And as far as I know, it is open now, but I didn't actually see an announcement of that. It was closed until October 29th for sure. but it may have opened again on the 30th, and that's kind of what I'm thinking happened. But I didn't get a confirmation, so it may be that I'm mistaken about that, and it's still actually closed. I've not ridden on the metro in a while to know whether or not it is. So there was that damage in Valparaiso, Viña area, but it's nothing compared to what happened in Santiago, let's face it. And the Santiago metro system is a fabulous system. It may not be something that I would desire to build as a libertarian and say, well, I like this sort of inefficient provision of goods and services provided by states instead of the market. I don't agree. But I do agree that the thing worked, and even though it was expensive and the fares are relatively high compared to what the market could have done, because it's linked to the state and has this Corfo funding and stuff like that. A lot of cronies are getting benefits one way or another. Then it's inefficient. And indeed, every metro stop, if you think about it as a libertarian, the placement of that metro stop was very important, because if you happen to be the serendipitous owner of land that can be built there, an apartment build or something right next to a metro stop in the future, the value of your land goes up fantastically. So don't think that these metro stops were just assigned arbitrarily or out of some kind of efficiency. They weren't always that way, at least not, I would say even most of them probably were not. There was some tip off, somebody making money on a building project or something else that happened, like, some kind of services near the metro line, especially if it's a metro line that happens to have one that connects to another metro line. So it ends up being 2 out of 1. And if we look at the Chilean, the Santiago metro system, we can see it's a very modern metro system. And I've been on many metros in the world, in the US and many in Europe and Hong Kong. I don't think it comes quite to Hong Kong standards, but it certainly beats most of Europe and probably everywhere I've seen in the US. And there are some exceptions in Europe, like Turin, a new metro system. They're really, really nice, small metro, but a very good quality type system. And Chile had that until this was destroyed by these people here. Notice that each one of these dots, for those that are watching here, I have to circle one here at the top. If you can see that, this is a metro station. That's where somebody can get off or on. And where they cross, like here, is a place what they call combinación, where you can transfer from one line to the other for free. And so there's a number of transfer spots, but you'll also notice that there's a lot of open space here. And the reason for the open space is, according to the latest statistics, out of the 136 metro stops, that's these little dots that we've circled here, these little dots, there were 136 of those on October the 16th or 17th, functioning well. 118 of those were damaged or some outright destroyed. That's huge. And it wasn't spontaneous, folks. There's no way. It was a coordinated attack, although we don't have any single person taking responsibility. The social media is howling all over the place, where the Sao Paulo Forum, or perhaps just the local communists, or both, were in charge of doing this thing. And that's why they were hit every 5-10 minutes. It's like they went to one metro station after the next to get to the next spot. But look how many spots are just wide open. Check out this spot that I'm circling here. There are no metro stops open on that spot. And how about line 5 or any of these here? Just look at some of these here. Just wide open spots. There are some missing here in downtown Santiago. There's only one. I think Salvador is still actually closed. It says it's not. Maybe it's open now. In here, there are like 8 metro stops, or maybe 6. Maybe I'm exaggerating. There's a lot, and there's only one open. I mean, they're all been trashed in there. Seriously. Also, as you can see, if I call up the screen and you have a chance to look at the other, let me close this up here. This is what the metro looked like before the attacks. It's not quite the same size. I know, I'm sorry about that. I don't know if I can increase it here. Let me double check and see if that's possible. I don't know if I can. But at any rate, suffice it to say, look at some major differences. For instance, did you notice that, let me annotate the screen again, see if I can change my pen color a little bit. We'll try pink, maybe a little bit wider brush. All of this line going to Puente Alto, look at it. It does not exist today. Isn't that amazing? It does not exist. Well, there's something there. There's the hull of the thing that's been burned down and destroyed, and it can be repaired in, many, over probably several years from what it sounds like. It may be faster, I don't know, but it doesn't exist right now. That's also the same with the light blue line, the 4A. Look at this. It's gone. It's not here. It's not on the map. It's a normal as part of the metro. And look here at all the metro stops on line 5. How many have we got now? 2 down here at this part. You see the point? Up here in the downtown area where I talked about Salvador and all that earlier, look how many are not there that were there before. Or how about this side over here, line 1 and line 5? Where is it? Here it is. It's not there. And neither is this part of line 5 over here. It's tremendously damaged, to say the least. And all of these extra metro stops and things like that that were up here before are simply gone. All of those stops are just destroyed. Look how many stops there were up here that are gone now, just completely gone. So yeah, that's pretty telling, I think. It gives you an idea still of what the problems are. They've been working to try to restore the metro here after all the damage, and still have not been able to come close to finishing it all. In total, the paper that I read today showed that there were 25 stations burned out of these 118 that were damaged. Remember, only 18 were left untouched out of all that. 7 were completely burned. I mean, just wasted. Let's take a look at what I mean by wasted, so you get a couple of ideas here. Let's see. Let me clear the screen first, if possible. Oh, well, before we talk about the destruction, by the way, let me turn the annotate back on. These were all the proposed lines that they were going to add right here that I'm highlighting. They had planned to put 3 more full lines. I can't draw very well with my mouse. And this one out here, I guess it's really 4 lines. It only goes to line 9. Let's see, so 7, 8, 9. I don't know where the 4th one is. Maybe one of them is going to be the extension. This might have a different name up here. And then they were also going to add extra sections like this down here of the metro. So they have expansion plans to make this the largest metro and most efficient metro system in America, period, whether it's South or North America, as I understand it. It was supposed to be a model for the world. And although it's expensive and it's government, again, monopolized, things I don't like, I have to appreciate it for what it is. It's a lot of sardine cans, but it did function very well as far as metros go in the world. Metros generally lose money. They're just, like some of the bread that's tossed from the circus or ringleaders of the state to pacify the people. But as far as metros go in the world, Chile was actually one of the better ones. And this is what we're suffering. And here's what it looks like, a few of the pictures of damage. I hope YouTube won't ban me for showing a picture that's in the news. It's a big risk, I realize. Let's see if we can clear our screen again. These are just a couple of bomberos, or firemen, a few of them here, inside one metro station, just to give you an idea what it looked like after it was burned. It's phenomenal, the destruction. And there are 25 stations burned like this, and 7 completely, just kind of beyond recognition type of burn. In addition to that, there were, in all of these places, all the ATM machines were looted and stolen, for all the money out. And there are quite a few in metro. I mean, you're talking about a lot of money that was made. People aren't talking about that, but I don't know how much money was actually made by knocking over anywhere from 2 to 15 ATM machines in these stations. But they didn't just let the money burn. They broke into them, trashed them, grabbed the money, and ran. As far as I can tell, in every case, they were smart communists financing their craft or whoever these people were. So that's interesting to note also. In addition to that, the figure is now no longer $300 million US dollars. It's risen to $380 million to fix. And that price might go up. And of course, it's a monopolized sort of service, but they are getting cheap labor from a lot of immigrants. They've created a lot of jobs, even though they destroyed so many by the communists doing their other kinds of crafts and eliminating businesses. A lot of menial tasks and glass makers, semi-professionals or semi-skilled people too, are having to come in now and repair things. So that's the cost, the current cost. There were, let's see, they said losses in 41 stations. This loss, sorry, this 380 million only counts 41 of the 118 stations that were damaged. The other stations were damaged much less. So let's say there were 41 really badly damaged. Well, 7 were just burned to the ground, burned to a crisp. Well, those are the worst. But then there was another group of 34 stations that were really badly damaged. And then the rest of them leading up to the other 118. So what's that? Another 77, more or less, I think that's right, 77 stations. They were really, damaged, but lightly compared to the others. And so the cost of that is not included in the 380 million people. It reminds me of and the same thing as when we drive down through Santiago right now or other places, you see some buildings, some old buildings with rocks thrown through every window, literally broke every window in the place, some of these old, beautiful buildings. Well, the old Keynesian idea in economics, well, this is a good thing because what this means is we can now simply employ more glaziers, more glass producers, more trucks to transport glass. And so people are working, having jobs. The problem with this idea, like Haslick pointed out in economics in one lesson, is it takes a look only at the short term and not at the long term, and the effects of only one little group might be benefited, not at the effects of the entire group of people living in a particular society and how they might be benefited or harmed. And when we destroy our wealth, when we destroy things that we have that are useful in making our lives better, and then have to replace it, it's damaging to us because instead of buying something new with this money, we have to use money, current wealth, to replace and get back to the same levels we were before. And so in the paper, one paper I read very astutely, they pointed out, for instance, this $380 million is the same cost as putting up a 368-bed hospital with full specialties, pediatric, cancer, whatever it might be. Talking about hiring all the doctors that you need for this and having all the equipment and staff that you need. So when you put it in those terms, you understand how big the loss really was when you're talking about this, right? The same is true as you could have built with the same money in Chile, using a labor cost here, 2 complete soccer stadiums. Wow, which hold, 80,000 people each. That's the cost of damage that we could have had those other 2 new things, 2 new stadiums if we really wanted those, or 1 really fabulous hospital. And now we don't get either because it's been damaged. Here's talking about the attacks on the bomberos. I think I did that. We looked at that before. Here's another picture of maybe because it's on the news, we won't get banned. But look how, let's see. Is it just, I'm going to plug off the Spanish there in case somebody doesn't understand. There were a total of, 10 trains burned and another 6 were totally vandalized in the system. And so this shows you some of the pictures of the trains suffering in the metro, just to give you a bird's eye view. And this is only one segment of the destruction. It's massive in the transportation system. And it doesn't even touch the buses that were burned. There weren't as many as the metro, but there were still a lot of buses burned. Look at the ATMs there that were looted too, and you'll see that. And this is them just trying to get through and get out of there with the being burned as it was. Yeah, this sign says, Chile, wake up. Yeah, Chile, wake up. Look what you've got on your hands here. Don't take these communists lightly. They're a very serious problem, and they're provoking all of this kind of destruction. Not just rampant criminals. There may be some who are vandals that enjoy doing this, but the great majority of it was not that. It was politically motivated by these communists or Frente Amplia people, or Amplitude that have done this kind of stuff, breaking in, as I show here. All right, well, anyway, we're not going to watch the whole newscast here. You get the idea. That's what it looks like at the Metro in Santiago. I think I've got one more thing to show too about it here. Oh, this is about we'll come back to this. Let me go back to the room here, our chat, and see if there's any questions, and also see if there's other things that we want to add here in a minute, just a moment. Okay, there we are. Joe says, I consider Chile's metro comparable to Singapore's. Yeah, I've been in Singapore's metro, and you're right, it is similar. The one in Turin and also the one in Hong Kong are really, really modern. And especially the one in Turin was just built in, well, depending on the line, I think it's all in the last 10 or 15 years. So it's quite nice. And if you look at line 6 in Santiago, before all this happened, that's an example of it. But some people were concerned about line 6 because there's no human operator at all. And there are people who actually got their arm caught in the door and stuff and had problems because of that. So it's kind of dangerous, people have complained about. But I'd have to agree, especially with the new lines, 3 and 6, they are definitely more comparable to other places in the world. YouTube and Google, or equals Google, why use them? Well, I guess there are only 3 choices when we do Zoomcast. One is Facebook. In fact, I'll tell you what it says. Oh, it doesn't tell me here anymore. It's Facebook, YouTube, and I think there's one other, and I'm not sure what to do. Okay, at any rate, let's go on here to the next item. Just to talk a bit about some of these other things that are happening in the country, and I'll be a little briefer with some of them than others, just to give you the catch up on the data. San Fernando and the south had some rioting just recently, right off kilometer 144 south of the Route 5, big group of people protesting. Some of it was violent and bad. So it's still continuing. It doesn't matter if Piñera lifted the state of emergency or any of that. They still want to impeach him and move him out. In Chile, just so you understand, if they do impeach Piñera in the House or the Cámara de Diputados, the deputies, as you might say here, it goes to the Senate to be approved or investigated. And in 20 days, they can depose Piñera. And if that happens, the president of the Senate, which is a guy named Quintana, he's kind of a social democrat from the PPD party, the same one that Ricardo Lagos was in. But he's definitely pretty good leftist. He's not a communist, but he's somewhere between there and a Bernie Sanders. So I'd say he's worse than Bernie Sanders. And he would become president, and he'd have to call for immediate elections. Actually, I think he has up to something like 120 days. So they can do a lot of damage in that time. And then the question is, would the left be able to win the presidential election? They're hoping that they can. I think the silver lining in all this damage we're talking about today is they probably won't be able to, depending on who is put up. If it's Jose Antonio Cast and he's too much to the right, then yes, there's a chance because the center will be offended. But it's possible that the left can be kept out because of all the evil that they've done, especially the communists. But it is an issue that we have to be aware of. If Piñera were to die in office or to become have a stroke and become physically incapacitated, then the Minister of Interior, Blumel, the new guy, he would become president. But it's different if he's impeached. So it's a different process than in America or other places in the world. You should be aware of that. That's just how it works here. There are also a great number of people in Plaza Italia, which is the Baquedano area of Santiago, right between Providencia and downtown Santiago, where those 2 hotels were burned that I mentioned before. There was another 20,000 people there, and that was still going on. We also had massive protests in Viña and in Valparaiso. That's why I believe here, if I can find it, here it is. Again, I hope showing this kind of news review won't be a problem. I want you to notice there's a bus about to enter in the turnaround lane here in the middle of this picture. And he's going to turn the wrong way and go against traffic. So I'm going to go ahead and crank this up. You see him turning against traffic right now? Let me increase that. He just turned against traffic, and now this is the route between Viña and Valparaiso, and all these guys are trying to get out of the way. It's because they couldn't get around the marchers and actually drive down the coast and go to Valparaiso from Viña. So this bus driver just took off. And look at all these people going, whoa, and there's the marchers. You see, that's why he couldn't get through. There were supposedly 100,000 of them the other day. I believe it was last weekend. And recently there were thousands more. I don't know how many, 2, 3, 4,000, making the 10 or 15 kilometer jaunt there from Viña to Valparaiso. But look at that bus. He's just still continuing to go. He's running all the risks he can. Crazy. That kind of stuff happens when you have the distortions caused by the communists doing things. There's really not much more you can say. It is a terrible situation. He survives, and so do all the other people that could have gotten a head-on collision with him. By the way, this is the second busiest road in Chile, the busiest being the one that goes through downtown Santiago. Okay. Let's see if we can get to the end of this quickly. You can see how he's going to get back on the other side of the road here at the next turnout. Kind of like, whoa, what's this guy doing?
Hey, John, we can't see it. You're on
your really?
Camera. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for letting me know. I'll turn it off here. That's too bad. Okay. Somehow I've got to be able to exit the full screen here. There we go. Can you see it this way, Joe? Does it show you here?
We're on your camera right now. We're not on your monitor.
Oh, well, maybe this is a problem. Another kind of problem that I have for not putting the share involved here. Hang on a second. I'm going to have to put our seminar on pause. I have people calling and people coming into the house to rent. I'll be back in just a minute, folks, and I'll let this play. Hello. Hello. Unpleasant interruption. I hope you got to see it that time. Is that true? Everybody get to see it? The bus going crazy down the road or not?
It wasn't obvious.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry it wasn't obvious, but I did explain at least what he was doing. That guy was going the wrong way on the road. I'm sorry that it wasn't obvious. Best I could do for you. Okay, let's go back then and talk about some of these other issues. All right, so there's also been a march that went from Limache, which is inland from Viña del Mar, about 30 minutes, and they actually went down the road and walked all the way 100 kilometers to La Moneda in Santiago to be part of the protest, part of their protests. And so that happened also. That's been going on. They are all treating it, as my wife points out, as kind of a big party. For them, this is just fun and games. And they dance, they have music. This kind of protest and destruction is part of it, but for the most part, people are going there. The great majority of people are just treating this like a big fun time. They get to go out, have a little picnic out there, effectively dance and play loud music. And you see this happening. So for them, this is the public showing its support for these leftist ideas that they're going after, and they're able to enjoy themselves effectively. And it's sick. Frankly, it's sick because you can't really disassociate the fact that all this destruction is going on at the same time they're partying it up. And my wife just appalled by it, and so are so many others. Douglas Pollock was telling me the other night when I had our Spanish broadcast with him that he was just amazed by the fact that these people were able to get away with it as they are, but he was optimistic that at one point Pinochet had 75% support in 1980. And even by the time people were tired of him in 1989 and asked him to step down, there was 45% of the people still voting and clinging to having him. So did the population change dramatically since then in terms of how they're going to vote? I don't know. But he's optimistic to think that, yes, there will be a time now that we'll be able to go back and gain power again or wrench power away from these communists. Their bark is very loud, but they're a very small minority. And a lot of these people in the center are not going to put up with it. Yeah, they want more benefits. They want bigger pensions and less hours to work. Many of them want a minimum wage hike. Many do not, by the way, but especially small businesses that can't afford employees at a minimum wage. But still, there is some question about whether or not we can win or not in the future. But I think the answer is yes. I think it requires us to sway the minds of about 10% of the people in the center to not vote for the communist and the leftist agenda that's going on. All right. Well, let's see. There's also been the tally is 1,459 people arrested in the Bio region. We don't hear much about that. That's Concepcion. Goes all the way inland to Los Angeles and around there. And there have been, in Concepcion itself, or in that province, 1,217. So around the Concepcion area, which has in the past been full of many Marxists, especially through the University of Concepcion and the Catholic University there, it's been a problem in the past. It seems to be in the present state too. There have been, on October 22nd was the latest data I could find on this, 191 people wounded in Valparaiso. 310 people were arrested in Valparaiso. 58 of them were people protesting, and 59% of them were committing crimes. 59 of them were committing crimes. 93 of them were curfew violators. So Valparaiso has suffered a lot as well, besides Concepcion, in all of this in terms of having damage and people destroying things. In Temuco, we saw Pedro de Valdivia's statue. And I'm no great fan of, as I said before, I think before here, it was in Spanish, I said, I'm no big fan of conquistadores. I mean, I'm a libertarian. And if they have a statue of somebody, though, I make use of that statue. I used to have one, I still do somewhere, of Mao Zedong, where I just keep them in the foyer of the house. So when people come in and say, why do you have a statue of Mao? I said, well, read the description below. And I'd put Romans 13 down there to go against this popular incorrect view that evangelicals have about Romans 13, thinking that the state is the one, and I would suggest that the state's the one who defines what's good and evil, not what God does. And the other side, I just put a point for anybody could appreciate that this was the greatest mass murderer in history, and we ought to remember him for what he was. R.J. Rummel, a professor from the University of Hawaii, said he killed 72 million people. I think that's probably correct. He was a very evil, nasty man, and he was a communist. So I think statues are very useful at times, as long as they teach us something. And even in Washington with the Lincoln Memorial and FDR Memorial, I think we do a great service in some sense to people if we can teach them with it. The problem is, of course, when we just have rampant vandalism. And so roping the guy's statue, Valdivia in Temuco, and pulling him, he actually busted the statue in half and showed the picture in social media going on the ground. It's just to be rancorous, violent, vandalistic people. There's really no point of it, but that's also going on around the country, that kind of stuff. Although that bothers me far less than other things, I'll have to admit, that you see. On the 23rd October. There were other stats that came out, which I don't know if changed a whole lot since then, because we have not heard of major structures burning down. For instance, the Cencosud system on that date had reported, and Cencosud owns Jumbo, Easy, Santa Isabel, and a few other smaller things, smaller like a pharmacy, I believe, and some other stuff. They reported 49 of their stores looted, 24 of them severely damaged, 5 burned, all right? A total of 77 of their 364 stores were affected negatively by this. Also, the place, sometimes they have malls, like they have one in Valparaiso, they have one in Viña del Mar, where their major stores also allow for other stores to be inside. But some of them really big, like Mall Plaza, which I think is in Maipu, and it was so thoroughly destroyed and looted that the whole thing's pretty much closed down. And I don't know if that's changed in the last week or not, but a lot of people lost their jobs and a lot of things went out of business that day on account of the looting over there and the destruction that was put in Maipu. Sodimac, which is owned by Falabella, actually that company, that group, had far less problems. The Cencosud system also has the Paris stores, and the Paris stores were not affected as far as I know. I didn't read anything about it. That's the same true with Falabella. I don't know if any Falabellas at all were damaged, but they also own Sodimac and they own Totus. As far as I can tell, Totus had very little problem. And I just don't, maybe it's just I didn't see any reports on it, but it's curious that was affected the least of all the supermarket chains. Some public choice economists like me might begin to look at why that might be the case. But at any rate, Sodimac had 15 damaged stores, and that's a pretty big shot. And the Concepcion one, I think we showed last time, being burned to the ground, was tremendous. There were also a lot of leader stores damaged. That's a different group. That's the Wal-Mart group, and it includes Cuenta. Cuenta is this overstock store that's mostly popular in regions, but also the lower class areas of Santiago, where they just have so much of stuff they can't put it through leader, that they throw it to Cuenta and it gets 10 or 20% marked down there. I've been in those stores before. It's kind of like going into a warehouse to shop, but people do it because it's a lot cheaper. And 125 of their stores, plus some extra ones I heard, like the one in Iquique and a couple others have happened since. So I'd say 125 plus, it might be 130 of their stores have been severely damaged or burned to the ground and looted, things like that. In Tricott's this little store, relatively little store compared to the others. You see it in different places. Apparently, they've closed down their system nationwide. Almost all of them were damaged. When I read that in the paper, I could hardly believe. There's one in Viña here. There are several places in Quilpué, Valparaiso, also in Santiago. And that's what the news story is. So I had no way to verify it, otherwise what I saw. It's a smaller chain like the Johnson chain, which is part of Cencosud also, that was damaged like that, but apparently it is the case. The Unimarc stores, which include things like the OK Market also, have 150 stores damaged. Very, very significant shot to them because they're a smaller group. I did not hear of any Montserrat stores, Montserrat stores being damaged, which is an even smaller chain. And that's also very curious. Why are some of these being damaged more than others? There were many pharmacies damaged. Salco brand, Joe and I were down in Reñaca the other day and they boarded it up. They were so concerned after they just massively looted that one in downtown Santiago. And you're right in broad daylight, so to speak, when all this other stuff's burning down right around it in Santa Rosa near the Alameda main thoroughfare. So they suffered. Cruz Verdes had a number of pharmacies looted and burned down. So they've not been free of it either. And I don't know the exact numbers, but there are lots of pharmacies that have been affected by it. We've also had 20 high schools that have been damaged in one way or another in the country. Why, I don't know. But there's high schools and there's many schools that are still not back in classes still, that are public schools or private schools. 55 is the last toll I heard of government buildings were damaged. So just summing up those ones I just mentioned, there's 1,100 businesses. And there may be more than that, because I've also seen figures like 1,300. Could be 1,300, could be 1,100. if you're talking about 100 people employed in each place on average, if that were a true number, I have no idea if it's correct or not, and you got 1,100, we're talking about 100,000 people, right, that don't have jobs. That's a pretty significant hit for the workforce. Not only that, but all the other people that supply and do services for those companies no longer have work. And maybe there are less than that. Maybe it's only 50 people on average, or 80. I don't know, or maybe it's more. I don't know. But it's a big chunk of the workforce that was dramatically affected and probably are not going to vote for communists, nor are their families that now have to support those people, because in Chile, the amount of money people get, especially if they're store owners or managers, is little or nothing for being unemployed, because of this. So this caused a lot of social ire, I would say, having these many stores destroyed. In addition to that, the Chamber of Commerce for the small and medium-sized businesses claims that there are 40,000 micro businesses that have been destroyed or harmed. I'm talking about kiosks or people that have 1 or 2 employees. I don't know how they came up with the 40,000 number, but that's very serious also. If that many people are now out of work, and a lot of people can no longer get the goods and services they wanted from those people on account of this. I also mentioned, I think last time, the 2 hotels in Providencia that were burned down. The Enel Tower, obviously, that was one of the first things to go. And many malls have been affected by this. The center, the downtown burning right at Santa Rosa Street that I alluded to a few minutes ago was also a tremendous problem. If you looked at the flames going up there, destroyed all those restaurants and stores there. And in addition to that, you saw lots of people being affected for office space up there too. Yes, Joe, I've noticed you're making a note. I'm planning to get through as quick as I can. What we want to do is give all the data we can to update people, and so I'm running through it as quick as I can. I have no particular time constraints on what we're doing today, and I know I'm maybe being a little long-winded if that's your point. That isn't uncommon for me, as you well know. Anyway, I'll try to be a little quicker if that makes any difference for folks, because I probably listening to long videos is hard to do. There's been massive graffiti and window breaking everywhere, as I've mentioned. There are also lots of volunteers out there cleaning it up. And when they try to clean up, there are communists who come by and get mad for taking out the graffiti and actually get in fights with them. But it's nice to see that people are willing to be volunteers and clean up the town after what these communists and criminals and vandals have done to it. The communists are also active in other things. They're trying to, of course, impeach Piñera. They're trying to also get rid of the Constitution that was formed by this joint committee under the military government, but headed by Alessandri, who was the president in the 1950s, 1958 to 62 or 64, or whatever it was, and so they're trying to change that again, get rid of it, and put in their communist constitution. This is very dangerous. They're showing up and trying to do these little town hall meetings and acting like they're just disinterested citizens. And so people in the PI chat group mentioned today, one strategy people have been going after them with is to show up and then ask them what party they belong to. And this one case happened not too long ago, apparently in Santiago. And they said, well, we're not from any party. We're just here to represent the people. I said, okay, well, go ahead and give me your route number then. And he got it. I don't know if he got his carnet card or what. And he says, I'm going to plug it into the Cervel page to see if you happen to be, working with some kind of a political party. And so the guy didn't want to look embarrassed and gave him the route number, and turned out Communist Party. Because you can do that. If you're registered as a party militant, as they call it, or a member, it shows up on the website. So these Chileans will lie all day about stuff, but it turns out, that this was the Communist Party. The whole meeting broke down as soon as that was found out, which is another encouraging bit of information for us, that although they had this great swell of all this, then in the end they backed down or it fell apart because people don't like the communists here, even though they do so much damage and stuff. Speaking of damage, as far as the 2nd of November, we have 1,574 hurt or injured. 473 have been hurt by buckshot. 305 by unspecified firearms. Not sure what that means. 40 from gunshot wounds, probably from the police or the cops or the military, excuse me, and 30 from rubber bullets. So a lot of people injured. only 20 people have been killed, and we'll talk about them in a second. 157 eye injuries have occurred. 179, some were arraigned for 179 arraigned and been brought to trial, which is a pittance compared to the number arrested, which isn't a surprise to me. 18 of those were from sexual violence, curiously, and 2 of them were rapes. I don't know what the other 16 were. I don't really want to know necessarily, but that was in the statistics too, that's been pointed out. As far as the people that have been killed, the 20 people that have been killed, interestingly enough, 12 of them were people trapped inside and they could not get out on account of the flames. So they were the arsonists, effectively, that didn't do a very good job. This I've heard of many other times over the years, that they think it's pretty easy to start a building on fire and then they find out they can't get out themselves and die. 4 of these 20 people were shot by military, and they were violating the curfew or doing something wrong. And it's too bad, as far as I'm concerned, that there weren't more, because this would have gone so bad. And so all this destruction I've mentioned would have been far less if they would have taken a firmer hand with these criminals. There was one person who was beaten by a carabinero and died out of these 20. 3 people were run over out of the 20. One was by a military patrol during a riot in Talcahuano, which is the city adjacent to Concepcion, and he died. And the other 2, which they're counting remarkably in the statistic, a man of 37 and a kid 4 years old, were hit by a drunk driver in some area near a protest. And so they're actually counting that against the government, as if the government had something to do with the drunk driver killing 2 people. But that's the way the left usually works here. They did that under Pinochet too. People that died that had nothing to do with the government or its actions are being included in the list of the abuse of against human rights. So that gives you an idea, to sum up. I think I've covered everything of the current amount of unrest and riots, which continue and are going to continue until Piñera backs down and just says, I don't want to be president anymore. The violence is not going to stop. And it's another reason is he's not going to put a hard hand on it. But you've got, as the EAN members, the special inside scoop on all these bits of data that I've been able to gather. How many people have been wounded, killed, how many businesses destroyed, the metro system being destroyed as it is. It's phenomenal, the damage here in Chile. We cannot deny that fact. Our question then comes back, what are we going to do about it? It's kind of leveled out in a sense. It's not quite as violent as before, but it's still bad. And these people are not going to go away. So plan B is we leave, right? We flee. We go somewhere else that's freer. The question is, what is that place? Does it even exist? All places have all sorts of problems. So at any rate, Piñera is a very, very weak president that's looking for his own popularity. When he threw out his cabinet last week, folks, he filled it in. He literally fired everybody, reassigned a few of them, and then called people in from the Valpo party, which is a leftist party with some libertarian leanings on a few things, but in general, it's a significant move to the left. And so now, including his Minister of Interior is from the left, all right? And so here we have this grand problem in Chile of having a weak government, and if Piñera dies or has a problem, maybe they put it in there as an insurance policy, we'll have an even more leftist president to replace him. And if he gets impeached, we will certainly have a more leftist president. So we're left with this very unusual, difficult situation of wanting to we're not very happy with Piñera at all for not having a firm hand against criminals and protecting private property. But he is our best choice in terms of the lesser evil of what might happen if he were impeached or someone assassinated him or something. So that's the dire situation we're in Chile. And it is dire. I don't think it's something minor. It's caused more than inconveniences for many of our lives. Although if we're in the upper class areas of Santiago, Viña del Mar, we don't have a lot of problems here, right? Even people getting run over were down in the Concepcion area. The drunk driver was down there too in the Concepcion area in a place called San Pedro de la Paz. So, those kinds of things are evident in many places in Chile, but they aren't necessarily affecting us directly. but they will at some point if they're not stopped. And therefore, if we're going to stay here, we have to do something to be more involved with the libertarian side of things. I don't think libertarians can win the general government election, but because of the way it's set up, we should be able to win Senate and House seats, even if it's only 5 or 3 or 6 or whatever, to have a voice and to make some potential policy impact. We might also be able to, like under the Pinochet government, win a ministry. If we support one of these middling kinds of conservatives or wherever they might be here that are better than the communists. And then, for our reward for doing so, we might end up getting a cabinet post. So that also is very possible. I don't even think it's a long shot. If we organize and do well, it's something that's very realistic and it's happened before. Unlike in the United States, we could actually have a greater percentage of libertarians in government, big government here, than they do in the United States. So those are the encouraging sides. The hard part is for us to try to sway 10% of people in the middle to not vote for communists, because we're not going to convince the others, folks. There's no way those communists and hardcore socialists are going to change. That 20, say there's 10% of communists. That's probably a little too generous. Maybe only 5. But at any rate, say that's the percentage. And there's another 15% that are hardcore socialists of one form or another. And then we got just the social leftist activists that are another 15%. I'm talking about the homosexuals, the groups that are feminists, radical feminists, radical ecologists, people like that. We're not going to convince them, most of them, maybe nearly none of them. So that 40%, to try to affect it and change their mind is going to be very difficult, unless there's a great regeneration of the Holy Spirit or something that makes these people think differently. It's not going to be any different for them. They're going to continue on their course. But that marginal amount in the middle, that undecided, unprincipled people that don't necessarily read about politics or care, that get swayed by just whatever small thing, we need to do whatever we can to make them not sway to vote for the communists or a new constitution, things like that. So I think that has to be our goal. And I decided that for the foreseeable future, rather than opt for my plan B, which I still have ready to use if necessary, I'm going to stay here and fight and go ahead and try to do the best I can to accomplish the things I've just mentioned politically. All right, so that ends my long introduction. And I've taken liberty for the long introduction too, because we have a small live group here. And I imagine people who are listening to this on the video will be happy to simply listen to the video alone and not have a lot of questions. But we're going to go ahead and answer a few here. I see Joseph said here, a left-leaning government is probably the best outcome. Yeah, I have to agree, like Piñera. Although it could be better. Remember, there is a chance that we could have better than that in Chile, especially if the people are really angry about all these loss of jobs and destruction by the communists. And the other left that wins is going to have to convince them that they aren't the communists. They didn't do that. They're the protesters, but they just want a better quality of life based on peaceful means. And they might be able to do that. They actually might be able to win that too. But we'll have to sway those people and make them understand that there's not a whole lot of difference between one group and the other. The communists are not that far different than the socialists here. You said that down here too, you need native Chileans to be libertarian or libertarian leading candidates. It's absolutely true. And one problem we have here, it's a good question to bring up, is people that are libertarians here are not well-read libertarians, with some really bright exceptions. I mentioned before, a guy I'm really pleased with in our group, Dusan, who really reads a lot and knows a lot, and some of my former students like Jose Luis or Gino, and some others. Gino's been on some broadcasts with me, and there are others, Sergio Melendez. I don't know if I should say everybody's last name or not. I guess it's okay, but there are some good libertarians here that have, many have been my assistants when I've taught in universities, and they became strong libertarians. They continue to read. There is the old group that's como Hermógenes Pérez de Arce, that's clearly libertarian, and they're in their 80s, and there are some like that. A lot of his generation has died already that were libertarians, were the Chicago boys, but there are some still around, like Pepe Piñera, and there are Ralph Luders. And although we don't agree with everything of people like Ralph Luders necessarily, he's still in the libertarian camp. A lot of the libertarians here that are kind of social libertarians, and but still have this leftist bias. You know, they believe libertarian principles for the markets like Concha does, but he's still pro-abortion, and he still wants the state to get involved with promoting two-parent homosexual parent adoptions, which libertarians are not in favor of. We don't want the state to get involved with the family at all, not just be in favor of one side or the other on that issue. We don't want the government involved with that. So the libertarians here, the quality of libertarians is vastly different than the quality in the US. And that's a huge push for you guys who are libertarians living in Chile. You can make a difference just helping to educate and get information to these people. Give them links to websites that are already in Spanish in the US from the Mises Institute, from Foundation for Economic Education, and whoever else, Mackinac or Independent Institute, et cetera. That's good. And if it's in English only, you can hire somebody to translate it. Put a little bit of money into it. Joe Johnson here in our EAN group has been working on some web pages we have now, Partido Independencia, to anglicize it, .cl, and libertar.cl. Libertar is a verb in Spanish. That means to set someone free. And we're going to be publishing articles and linking to other people's blogs who are largely libertarians like Villegas y Teresa Marinovich, and we're going to do it in Spanish. So we'll allow some English to be in there, but for the most part, this is a Spanish-speaking country, right? So we need to be in that language. So those are things you can start to do and start to make a difference. And that's going to require a grassroots movement that shows people why a free society is better than an unfree society, and sway over enough voters so that mass of leftists and communists and violent people cannot dominate us in the future. And then hopefully get somebody in office who's not a spineless politician like Piñera that simply allows, how many stores did I say? 1,200, 1,300, who knows, businesses to be destroyed. I mean, it's crazy. Why in the world would we even have a state? Why is it even necessary to have a state if that could happen? It'd be better to live under anarchy and not pay any taxes, wouldn't it? I mean, what's the point? They can't even defend the streets against looters and stuff like that. Chile's making a great case right now for libertarian anarchism by what we've seen, because the government is so inept. And of course, the minarchists are going to respond, well, it's not really a fair case to put Piñera up there who's trying to make peace with leftists, right? And really is a Christian Democrat by birth. Yeah, okay. And so what we really need to have is somebody who's a little more conservative or libertarian in office. But this isn't going to happen. Okay, you can have your test case in the future, but right now it's not looking very good for the minarchists, at least at the moment, maybe in the future. Yeah, native Chilean voters will never vote for a foreign-born candidate. Why do you think that's true, Joseph? I'm not sure that's the case at all. In fact, I would say the opposite. Because you're a gringo, okay. No, I would say the opposite. My opinion is that Chileans do not trust other Chileans, but they automatically trust us who are gringos far more, because they do not believe that we have the same culture that they do of being identified by the lie, defined by people who are without trust or untrustworthy. They're defined by people that are trying to take advantage of somebody else at all times, whether it's in a dating relationship, a business relationship, or in politics. And they tend to think gringos are somewhat stupid, gullible, naive, what they use the word innocent. But that works to our advantage too, because when we level a criticism, it has a different weight with them. When we tell them something, they can usually believe us, and we will actually perform. And unless it's an accident or something happens to us, we will keep our word. That is unusual for them, but they know that about us. They still don't understand why we could have newspaper stands in New York City and people would put a quarter in, and a long time ago, I don't even know if they exist anymore, and pull out only one paper instead of taking the stack. They just think it's a strange, weird perversion in our brains that allow us to think like that or act that way. But that also works in our favor, because they have a different level of respect for us automatically. And they also believe our education is different because when they went through school, they cheated. Almost all of them, I'm sure. I even had some of my helpers, or one of my helpers I caught cheating, and he's usually my best students because it's just in their nature. They do it here. From the time they're in kindergarten, they learn that lying and cheating are okay. And I hate to be so generalizing and critical, but to find a Chilean who does not lie or cheat, you're talking about something, certainly in the 1 out of 10, and probably more like 1 out of 100 that don't practice those things. It's just part of who they are. And that is an advantage for us because it's not part of who we are. When we go to school and we have a good GPA and we get a good degree, especially if we have graduate degrees and have done papers and things like that, it's much more believable for them than it is to listen to a Chilean that has degrees like that, even if their degrees overseas. All right, good. You have a point. Someone told me that gringos do what they say they'll do. It's culture. Yes, indeed. Appreciate the question there. All right, so we've been going an hour and 12 minutes or something like that. There is no need for me to continue on further. That is all the information I had today, unless one of you guys who's live has another perspective. I will just, and I'll give you a second here. Joe, do you want to chip in with something, or Joseph? You think the trend short term is to the left? It may be. But remember, have some perspective on this, Joseph. Santiago has 7 million people. In our calculations at PI, there's no way they could have fit 1.2 million in that square in those surrounding areas. You'd have to put six human beings in 1 square meter. That's just not going to happen. But let's assume that it was 500,000 people. That's only three for every square meter. That's still less than, 8% of the population of Santiago was out there. And some were kids that were there at any rate, not all of them. But the hard left here has been really capable of calling out its people to go and do these kinds of marches historically in Chile. And remember, right before Piñera was elected, the left had an extraordinary lead. It looked like they were really going to add up all the leftist candidates together and vote for Guillermo, and Piñera had no chance. Piñera had, I think, 43%, as I recall, of the vote, and all the leftist parties added up over 50. But Piñera won, and Piñera won with 55%. And that's the issue. There is a solid amount of jello in terms of the political reality in Chile. There may be 20% of Chileans that can be swayed at the last minute by emotional arguments. And those are the key thing. If they're scared, because they're not interested in breaking things, those 20%, they just want to go through life, have fun. They may not be big thinkers, like typical political events tend to be in the middle. And right now, I'm not sure they're very well swayed when we publish these statistics. Our greatest enemy is that the main media does not emphasize this. And when they go to interview people on live, they're talking to the Communist Party members. Why would you do that when it's only 5% of the votes in the Congress? But that's what they're doing. They give these guys way more time than they deserve. And that is a problem. The media here is a problem. If some libertarian could fund a radio or a TV station somehow, some way, I have no idea what it costs. And instead, I'm not talking about doing something lame like Fox News in the US. I mean a truly free market oriented news channel that does all the news like Fox News would or any other thing here, except they would not have the leftist bias. And instead of always interviewing a leftist, we would always interview a libertarian, even after we interviewed a communist or somebody who believed in free markets, even if it was a conservative. That would have a tremendous impact because Chileans don't read, and what they get is from the television. And what they get from the television is an enormous injection of leftist ideology that gets rammed down their throats. So they just repeat like parrots these mantras that are put forth by communists. So a think tank might help us here. But my guess is we need something that is going to reach these masses some way, and that just needs to sway over the 10% of the jello so that they don't vote for the left. And as soon as that happens, remember on the other side, there's still that 45% that voted to keep Pinochet even in 1989. And they're mixed of these four currents I mentioned before of conservatives, where we're lumped in with them and we're uncomfortably lumped in with conservatives because libertarians are not conservatives. But let's face it, in Chile, we're far closer to them than we are to the left. I mean, the left is just way out there, enemies, total enemies of us. They want to kill us. So yeah, we'll vote most of the time with them as a bloc, but that 45% is a pretty big number. And Piñera proved that all that number would support him. And then he also got another 10%, the jello. That 10% of the wiggly wobbly middle people here can be swayed by certain things. It's not going to be by academic conversations like we're having even today. It's got to be really low level stuff that makes them either really feel scared of the communists, or they should be, or that they're going to lose their jobs because of the communists or the hardcore socialists, or some other thing. And that needs to be worked on. So we can make an impact on that. It may cost us something. If somebody says, well, I don't want to come here and spend money. I wanted the whole, just to be able to ride into Chile and live my life in peace for the rest of my life and not spend anything. Sorry, it didn't work out that way. It wasn't my decision. And sometimes if you want to be free, you're going to have to pay for it. And if you go to other countries, you're going to have the same problem. It's not going to be this, any better there. It's not like some libertarian paradise that's clearly better than Chile, unless it's, again, living on an island or in a rich enclave. Even places like Singapore, we'd have tremendous problems as libertarians living in Singapore. Not from the economic side, but from the social side, right? Look at Hong Kong right now. What a disaster that's been in so many ways. Even places like Norway and Switzerland, Georgia have tremendous social problems, and not to mention extremely expensive to go to. So there are other places one could consider going, but you can't just say, oh yeah, but that's going to be a free ride, easy street for me in those places. And it's just simply not the case. It's a fantasy if you think that. So it may be that you have to put some money and time into Chile, and that's how it works. If everybody did put a little bit of money and a little bit of time in, I think we'd have an enormous impact here. And I think we'd have an impact because we're far more diligent than certainly people on the right are, and probably more than many communists are here in Chile. So we could actually have an impact. Look at America. Look at the institutes there, libertarian institutes. We have a lot of them, and a lot of different variety of them, because we're dedicated people, and we have intellectual arguments which are very strong, certainly superior to communists. So try to think about those angles here and what you can do. Partido Independencia, the Independence Party, is one way. That's something we can all get behind and do something in, and we all should. At least you can educate other people there, share information, ideas, at the very least. And if you can contribute some money, not much, even if everybody just contributed $50 a month, it'd be a lot. It'd go a long way. And some people could do some larger endowments for things like we're talking about. Okay, and this is the positive outcome you said. Oh no, sorry. Some Latin American countries are going left socially. Yeah, but they're lost causes already. Chile has the heritage of being free market. Remember that. The history is here. And if you look at Argentina and Venezuela, Bolivia, no, they're lost causes. Colombia, I think we have reason for hope. And Panama, Peru, distantly, but Ecuador, the rest of Central America, just forget it. All the islands, forget it. I mean, they are leftists to the core, those people. And even their right-wing parties, we would consider left in places like Chile. So different story. Chile is the Alamo in many respects. And this is the positive outcome. The media is the same as in the US, Canada, US, France, Germany, etc. Yeah, I would say so, except I think it's in some ways worse here, in some ways better. It's honester in Chile. It's more down to earth, and they talk, and it's not just this, ramming it down your throat kind of pre-programmed enema or something, whatever, or ramming it up with either end that you might get. That comes in the US and in Europe, but here they still have a long dialogue and let other people talk, but the great emphasis is given to these hard leftists. And when they talk, it's disgusting. And so that has to change, where we have reporters and other people who are willing to talk to people from the right, or including libertarians. So I appreciate all of those very good comments there, Joseph. Any other comments or questions? We've been going an hour and 20 minutes. Sounds like a good time to stop. If no one else has anything else to say. You can, yeah, thank you, Joe. If you can write the website there, I'll repeat it again, partidoindependencia.cl. You can see the website now. It's sort of under development. We're still adding things to it, or Joe is. Appreciate Joe's effort so much in that, because I don't have knowledge or time to really go and do it. And we need people like that too, by the way. If you could edit videos, we need that. We need people who can send our stuff out to social media. And our groups are growing. I mean, they're substantially adding more people who are interested, especially in seeing what the communists have done in libertarian ideas. So we need to feed that by, sharing posts from the US, especially if they're already in Spanish, if not, getting someone to translate it for you and publishing them. And Joe now has sites on libertar.cl, as well as on the Independence Party site. Independence Party website, people who post there are going to have to be party members who agree with our principles. And the principles are posted there in Spanish. So if you read Spanish, or you can use Google to translate them, you can see what we think about. We are a standard libertarian group that's pro-life. I mean, that should say it all. We've got some other details in there that mention the Chilean history and free banking and things like that. But and my idea of privatizing the border, which I think is a superior solution politically than to offer simply open borders. That sounds bad. It's not as politically palatable, and it also doesn't protect property rights as well as privatizing it, the services on the border. Anyway, Joe's put the links there, and those are important to get involved with. Sign up, whatever newsletters there, get involved with posting, commenting, and then get out there too in the real world when the leftist post in Facebook and their other tripe anywhere else on the internet, and respond to it. Don't let them get away with talking about the glories of Allende, for instance, or about how Pinochet did this or that or the other, or is a great torturer. These things which are largely nonsense that the revisionist historians have come up with. Also try to reach out to evangelicals if you can. People ask me why. Why do I constantly mention this? Because I'm an evangelical? No, it's not the main reason. It is true that I believe that as a Baptist, I'm naturally a libertarian. I think that's been proven out since John Locke was first influenced by Baptists. We are the premier religion that's linked to a libertarian idea because the scriptures teach that. But in terms of the political party, we have no religious ties. I mean, we have atheists, we have people I think who are Taoists, we have Roman Catholics, and all kinds of Protestants, as long as Baptists in the party. But in terms of getting votes here, folks, even the most ardent atheist has got to understand that he's really better off in a society dominated by Baptists, for instance, than he would be by Muslims or communists or even Hindu people. Those institutions are not that attractive to atheists, and not only that, might kill them. They're not well received. And on top of all that, how many atheists are there? Let's say we convert all the atheists in Chile to be libertarians. We're talking about less than probably 5% of the population that are truly atheists. It may be more than that, I don't know, but it's not a large number. Whereas evangelicals are around 20%, and most of them are naive Pentecostals, which is a problem in and of itself. There's no question about it. They're Pentecostals emotionally. They don't know the Bibles very well. They don't read much. So it's a tremendous problem for us to overcome. But let's face it, folks, that is a voting block that it's important to reach. And especially with Baptists and probably Presbyterians, they're going to be very, very willing to entertain the kinds of things we're talking about as libertarians. They've been persecuted so much in life that they like the idea of a free society. And that's why the First Amendment in the US was so important, especially the Baptists. That's why Baptists pushed for it, like John Leland and Isaac Backus. So bear that in mind. And then there's also a segment of Roman Catholics we can reach. And Roman Catholics nominally are 60-something% of the population in Chile. Now, how many of them actually go to church? I mean, yeah, they're Catholics, but they're also lesbians or homosexuals at times, or they're adulterers, or who knows whatever else. I mean, they don't practice very much about the religion of Catholic doctrine. And people like Jews, by the way, are even less. That's also a target group that's possible for us. A lot of libertarians have been Jewish people, but it's less than, I think, 0.5% of the population here, or less than atheists. But to go back to the Catholics for a second, Catholics also have been tremendously in favor of communism in Latin America through its liberation theology. And in the Vicario de Solidaridad, this Vicaria, I think it was called, de Solidaridad, that Hermogenes talks about in his book, they tremendously helped the communists against Pinochet in Chile. So when you talk to Catholics, you can find out, first of all, if they really believe in their doctrine. And if they don't, then you have to sort of cross them off the list as part of this jello, 20% that you might be able to influence at the margin. But as far as making serious libertarians, you're going to have to really find those serious Catholics that are Opus Dei or Legionarios de Cristo that really believe their doctrine and try to act it and practice it. Those are important possibilities too. But I'm guessing it's less than 10% of the population here. So that's another issue, isn't it? To bear in mind. So when you're trying to figure out who are we going to have to capture practically to get the votes we need, you need to think in these terms. Evangelicals have got to be the biggest target group we're going after. And if we can pick up a few Jews and atheists on the side, great. Other than that, we have to go after these old line Catholics, whatever line they might be, that are serious about their religion and not going to support communism. And they're here. There's a lot of them here, but again, it's 10% of the population, might be 1 million or 2 of them here in Chile. So practically, politically, think about it in those terms. I'm not supporting any of those religions other than my own when I mention them. I'm just saying, as far as politics go and getting us what we want, a free society or a freer society that doesn't have communist violence like this, we need to be aligned with these people. And that's what our Partido Independencia is permitting to do. All right? So if you can help in any of those areas, you're a Catholic or you're an evangelical and you can reach people, great. I'll also be happy to send you, or if you could come and get it here in Reñaca, a couple of my books that I've written, like The Christian Theology of Public Policy, Highlighting the American Experience, and my book, Bible and Government, which have sold thousands of copies in the US and they're in English. If you have people here that you meet that are evangelicals that need to be convinced of libertarian ideas from the Bible, I'd be happy to share those, or you can pay a small donation and take them to them, I don't know, and try to convince people that speak English here to use those. There's also a translation of Bible and Government, not a very good one, that's available in PDF form. I'd be happy to share with you if that's useful. All right, good. Well, I think that's a good time to close. We've gone an hour, almost an hour and a half here. This is the Escape America Now, November 2nd, 2019 webinar for members only, talking about the problems we have in Chile. And hopefully we'll be able to spread this to other folks who are not able to attend today, and even non-members in the future, since members have the first shot at this. But the information could be useful for others as well. So I'm glad for those who attended, appreciate your time today. And I also look forward to talking about these things as they may develop in the future. Thanks for attending, everybody. This is Dr. John Coben saying goodbye for now. Hope you have a great Saturday. Bye-bye.